First up, I would say the most common mistake that people make when applying for residency in Mexico is misunderstanding the types of residency that are available. Now, if people have done a little bit of Googling, they might have heard of temporary residency versus permanent residency, but what are the differences between temporary and permanent residency in Mexico?
Temporary residency is the first residency that you may have. Um, and you got it normally for 1 year. Then the next year you can renew it for 1, 2, or 3 years. And then when you have 4 years in total, you can apply for permanent residency. Permanent residency is mostly considered for retirees. They live from their investments, they live from their savings, they have social security, or they sold their company. Most of the consulates, as the last 6 months, they are asking for people to have 60 years old. So they can be some exceptions, but that's normally the requirement. My name is Yvonne Pavan. I am the general manager of Host Relocation. We offer any kind of relocation services that you might need to have a very nice life here in Mexico.
As I understand it, the only residency holders who are able to bring a foreign plated car into Mexico are people with temporary residency. I've seen people who qualify for permanent residency, but they say, no, 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 give me temporary residency at least for the first 4 years because I want to be able to have my car in Mexico with me.
That's right. For different reasons, just driving, bringing their things, or they have a family, or they have pets. That's also very common. It's not easy to fly with pets on the airplane. So they are just coming back and forth with pets.
Does temporary residency allow someone to work legally in Mexico? For example, to go into a restaurant and apply for a job as a waiter?
In this kind of visa that we are talking about, if you apply through economic solvency, you cannot work, but that doesn't mean you cannot work ever. You need to make a different process to pay for a work permit. For example, you are here, you said, I'm going to live with my savings or I'm working online, but suddenly you receive a job offer from a Mexican company or a school or somewhere. The company needs to give you a job offer and certain requirements that the company needs to fulfill, and then you need to pay for a work permit. They will exchange your card with permiso para trabajar.
Another common mistake that I see people making when applying for residency in Mexico is underestimating financial requirements. Since you've been doing this, even since I've been doing this, we have seen the financial requirements for proving economic solvency increase every year, and some years increase by as much as 30%.
Just for you to understand, the economic solvency requirement is based on the minimum wage salary in Mexico. So they said for temporary residency, you need 500,000 UMA. That means the minimum wage per day in Mexico. So unfortunately, the consulate's requirements varies from one consulate to another. So, because they are also based on the state they are located. You know that in the US or Canada, there are some cities more expensive than others. To come as soon as possible because it's for sure that January it will increase. How much? We don't have certainty about it, but it will be higher than last year, that's for sure.
Unlike a lot of countries in the world, Mexico doesn't have a requirement for how long you need to live in Mexico or how long you need to be in Mexico to maintain your residency status. So theoretically, you could apply for residency now, get temporary residency, renew that for the maximum of 4 years, graduate into permanent residency without ever actually living in Mexico, and then moving to Mexico 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, but taking advantage of the current financial requirements since those requirements are going up annually. Not knowing that you need to start the process in your home country. For example, since I'm from the US, I started my residency process at a Mexican consulate in the United States.
The only application that can be done here in Mexico is the family link. Either if you have a Mexican children here, or if you are married with a Mexican citizen or with a residency holder. Those are the only cases that you can do in Mexico without stepping outside or visiting a consulate. For example, if there's an Australian people here and it's a headache to go back to Australia, I'm sorry, they need to go back to Australia. They cannot go to the US because one of the requirements to apply is to be a citizen or have legal registration in that country and bank accounts in the currency of that country.
Once you have submitted your residency visa application to the consulate and you are approved at the consulate and you have the visa in your passport, that visa is good for 6 months. So from that time you are approved at the consulate, you have 6 months to travel to Mexico and finish the process, the canje step, the exchange of your residency visa for your residency card.
Once you step into Mexico, you have 30 days to start the process in immigration. You cannot use that as a tourist visa anymore. They will see the visa in your passport and then your 30 days will start running. So you need to start the process yes or yes. If you said no, no, I don't have time because I just going for a week and I don't consider that timing, I'm so sorry, you will need to get the visa again. So that visa, it says on the requirements, one entry visa, because some consulates doesn't explain that, but it says on the requirements, one entry visa, and it has the issue date and the expiration date. So just please consider that.
Believing a tourist visa can be easily extended. I am still getting a lot of emails from people, YouTube comments from people wanting to know about extending a tourist visa via the regularization program.
This program has been extended from 2018 till now. So basically, if you have a stamp in your passport, that is mandatory requirement. A stamp in your passport in within those years, 2018 to 2022, you can qualify for this program. So you don't need economic solvency requirements. You just need the stamp and you need the overstaying your tourist visa. You can be either here or you can be back to your country or in any other country. But if you have the stamps in within those years, you can come back to Mexico, overstay your visa in purpose to apply for the program. So that's is a program. We don't know if it's going to continue next year or not. It depends basically in our new president. So we don't know which new rules they can present, but that is a program, and that's the only one that can convert a tourist visa for a temporary resident card.
Not bringing proper documentation to either the consulate or INM. In Mexico, they are very, very particular about names and signatures.
I have had cases that the marriage certificate, they wrote the second name, just the initial, or they are Latin American people that went to the US or Canada and they subtract the second last name. So for Mexican authorities, that will not be the same person. And what they need to do is just do an affidavit, which is an identity letter that they need to do in their, again, in their country of origin. If you're Canadian, you need to do it in Canada. If you're Australian, you need to do it in Australia with a notary. Or here in Mexico, if we have a Mexican embassy of your country, saying that you are the same person. And also when you sign the documents for Mexican authorities, the passport will be your ID document. So that name is going to be on your card. So that name is the base for all the documents that you're going to present. And also the signatures need to match exactly as in your passport. So the signature is what it is in your passport. The name, it is on the information page in your passport.
I've also seen people have issues with their banking information, that the name on with their bank account doesn't match the name on their passport page. Maybe it's like you said, an initial instead of a full middle name, or maybe there's a junior or some other sort of addition to their name that's, not there across all of their documentation. Before you travel to the consulate, before you go through the headache of making an appointment, make sure that the documents that you are going to show match the name in your passport. There's been some confusion with the wording on consulate websites as far as an official bank statement or something to that nature. What kind of bank statements are consulates looking for?
The bank account statements needs to have a signature of an employee of the bank or a stamp. They are adding that to the website in the requirements in highlighted in yellow. And I always said add a business card because a signature can be a scrabble, but you need to add a business card to that. So if they said very specific in the requirements of the consulate, that is a must. You cannot skip that because you go to the interview and if you don't have that, you will be rejected. Another important thing that also it's getting common beside the bank account statements is if you if you are younger and you are working online, they are asking for a letter of your employer saying that you are allowed to work remotely. So I have had some refusals on the last 6 months again that if they said, okay, I'm gonna work online for my the same company that I'm working for in the US, Europe, Canada, and they said, okay, give me the letter of your employer saying that you are allowed to do that.
Ignoring local consulate variations.
You may have a friend in Seattle and you are here in Texas, and the requirements and the experience will be different. So it's not the same experience. You need to be pretty sure of the documentation you're going to present to be able to be successful. So that's very, very important that you send an email to the consulate, that you check their website just to read point by point on the requirements that they are asking for. Also, to make an appointment with them, it can be email, they can use their website, or they can use WhatsApp. So also it's important for you to be um, aware of what is going to be the way to get an appointment with them.
Facilitators like yourself can offer, I guess, clarification
The
or
guidance
advice,
to that
guidance.
process.
Guidance is a good way of putting it, but you're not going to be you're not going to be facilitating the visa process at the consulates in the US or elsewhere in the world.
We are not allowed to make the appointment in your behalf. We are not allowed to communicate with the consulate in your behalf. We can be penalized for that. And of course, on the second part of the process here in Mexico, we basically do everything for you. All the paperwork, the appointment. If you hire a facilitator, we normally are there with you, translating, helping, assisting, so the process can be smooth and like less stressful for you.
Mismanaging the final steps in Mexico.
Getting the visa is not it. That's only the first part of the process. You need to come back to Mexico or come to Mexico and complete the second part by getting a plastic. So you need to go to immigration office, make the exchange called canje. Canje is a Mexican word, verb that is exchange to a resident card. So just please consider the process is divided into two steps.
You are supposed to start the process within 30 days of entering Mexico. So you really need to get on things, to get a move on it once you're in Mexico, because if you were to let those 30 days lapse, you could your visa could totally be void and all the
It's
work
voided
you put in could be gone and you'll have to start back from square one.
all over again.
You and I did a video not that long ago about the new appointment system in Mexico with INM, and that a calendar is open 2.5 weeks out. And so it's really important that even before you travel to Mexico, you are organizing your appointment at INM, especially if the time that you're going to be in Mexico, if you only have a little bit of time to complete the residency process, you want to make sure that you are getting in with your appointment at INM and not thinking that you can just, stand in line overnight like what we did in the past and get an appointment the next day. Assuming Spanish isn't necessary. People at the consulate are bilingual, but you'll hear them all communicating with each other in Spanish. So they prefer to speak in Spanish. But what I usually tell people, and I'm sure you tell your clients something similar, if you're at the consulate in the US and you let them know that you don't speak Spanish, or I usually tell them that you're working on Spanish, tell them
You are
that
not
you're learning,
fluent.
right? That they'll be kind enough to speak to you in English. But at INM in Mexico, it's a different story.
They have employees that speak English, but it's not in the majority of the offices, and it's not the majority of the time. Of all the paperwork that to fill it out in Spanish, the letters are in Spanish, because it's our official language. So yeah, it will be very useful if you start practicing Spanish, and also we will help you with all that as well.
Overlooking the exit and re-entry process. When you are leaving Mexico or re-entering Mexico, it's so important to show your residency card.
When they are leaving Mexico, they need to go to the immigration office at the airport. In some airports, they ask you to fill out a format with your basic information, name, flight information, passport, airline number, and you just give that paper to the airline people, or some immigration offices just stamp as exiting the country, and then you just show the stamp to the airline people at the gate when you are leaving. But the most important thing is when every time you come back to Mexico, show your resident card. Have it together with your passport, because your passport is your travel document, so you need to show it. There are some, I will say, picky immigration officers that if you take a minute, if you have your passport and you take a minute to take your resident card out of your wallet, they said, I'm sorry, you're a tourist again. And also in Mexico, they have been installing like tourist machines to scan your passport and go through quickly. You don't need to use that. If you are a resident, just buy that. Those are for tourists to come through quickly, but not for residents. For resident, you need to talk to a person, to the immigration officers normally, show your card. They will stamp as RT, residente temporal, RP, residente permanente.
Confusing residency with citizenship. Temporary residency is not permanent residency. Permanent residency is not citizenship.
Citizenship, you can get it if you were born here, or if you have parents with Mexican citizenship, that means Mexican passport. If you want to get it as a foreigner without any family link, you can do it if you are a permanent residency for 4 years. I mean, you got the permanent residency, so you have been legally here for 4 years. You need to wait 1 more year, and you need to be very fluent in Spanish. That's very important. If you are going to apply, let's say next year in 2025, you have you have lived here in 2023 and 2024. 1 year and a half of the last 2 years you are going to apply. That's the difference between residency that I mentioned, that the immigration law doesn't require you to live here to keep your residency status. Well, in citizenship, yes, you need to live here at least the last 2 years of applying for that.
if you know the mistakes that there are, it's a lot easier to avoid them. And if at any point in the process things feel too overwhelming, I highly, highly recommend that people watching this reach out to you for your help, for your expertise.
Don't hesitate to contact us for any kind of guidance or information. We will be happy to assist you.
I'm Alex from backpackingbrunette.com. Thanks for watching.